The proceeding will start shortly.
I remind members that they are expected to wear face coverings when not speaking in accordance with NHS guidance and with the House of Commons Commission. And can I remind members that they're asked by the House to have a lateral flow test twice a week if coming onto the parliamentary estate. And there is a test centre downstairs where you can do that, or you can do it at home. And please also give each other and members of staff space when seated and entering and leaving the room. Jonathan Gullis to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huck. And may I start by saying what a pleasure it is to serve under your chair. And I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 594155 relating to Gurkha pensions. I want to start by thanking the petition creator, Roy Brinkley, who himself is a veteran of the Grenadier Guards, for starting this petition. In total, the petition has attracted more than 107,000 signatures from all over the country, including 99 from the Stoke-on-Trent, from Stoke-on-Trent North Kidsgrove and Talk, enabling us to discuss the important issues behind it today. I also want to thank Roy and his friend Jack for taking the time to talk to my office earlier today about the petition and all it means to them, and apologise for not being able to meet them in person, but sadly, unexpected parliamentary business meant that I had to ask my staff to take the meeting on my behalf. I know that Roy is hoping to be, or is in here in Westminster Hall today, and that many Gurkhas have turned up in Westminster today to show their support for the campaign. Sadly, I am aware that we are likely to be disrupted by votes this evening, but I hope Roy and everyone outside will feel that they have done their campaign justice this evening. When preparing for today's debate, I realised I had not spoken on the Gurkhas in this place. I want to start from the outset for this topic as someone who holds all members of our armed forces in the highest possible regard. As a bit of family history, my great-great-uncle Alan Gullis fought on D-Day, who still lives today, and my grandfather and hero Terence Gullis served in the Royal Marines during the Suez Crisis, and my maternal grandfather, William Beecham, served in the RAF. There is also a strong veterans community in my area of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk. We are proud to be the home of the Staffordshire Regiment. In Kidsgrove, the Royal British Legion has created a beautiful and touching war memorial garden, which is maintained and used all year round. And in Smallthorne, we have the fantastic Veterans Breakfast Club at the Green Star pub, run by Martin Hunt and Paul Horton. This family background and the strong ties to the armed services that we have in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk were key motivations behind the desecration of War Memorials Bill, as I brought forward in June last year with my honourable friend and gallant friend, the member for Bracknell, to secure better protection for memorials to our glorious dead. On top of this, today's debate comes at a poignant time, following on so soon from Remembrance Sunday. Every year we have poignant services across North Staffordshire and our United Kingdom in memory of our glorious dead. And this year, it was a real privilege to be able to attend the memorial service at Tunstall Memorial Gardens and lay wreaths and pay respects at memorials across the entire constituency. This year, it's also been very moving to be able to plant a cross in Parliament's inaugural Remembrance Garden on behalf of the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk, in memory of heroes like Gunner Zach Cusack from Smallthorne and so many other brave men and women who served Queen and country. And so I speak today as someone who knows just how amazing all our veterans are, and I hope I will do this subject the justice that it truly deserves. First of all, I want to say I know how just highly regarded the Gurkhas are and have been for over 200 years. Their service to the British Crown, both here and overseas, has been marked by excellence and sacrifice. As Roy said to my team earlier, these are some of the most loyal soldiers this country has ever had, and they have served on the front lines of every war that the UK has fought in for the last 200 years. Prince Harry famously served alongside them during his tour of Afghanistan in 2007 to 2008 and commented that when you are with the Gurkhas, there is no safer place to be. This record of excellence and heroism goes somewhat under the radar, and so I want to thank Joanna Lumley and the campaigners like her for bringing the Gurkhas into the limelight. I suspect, like many, I became aware of the problem Gurkhas have been facing following the tireless efforts of Joanna and all that she has done to get this issue on our political agenda. And more recently, we have had our attention refocused by the hunger strike outside Downing Street. Indeed, I understand that Roy knows one of the strikers personally. Having spoken to colleagues in the Ministry of Defence, and indeed other colleagues in this place, before today's debate, I know that their service is incredibly highly valued and respected. Their distinguished service is a source of immense pride in both the UK and Nepal. From engaging with Roy, I understand that the crux of the issue is the pension scheme itself, with the concerns of many Gurkhas relating to the historic Gurkha pension scheme, which ran from 1948 to 2007. Roy is seeking equal pension rights pre-1997, including back pay. The scheme differed from the arrangements for the rest of the British Armed Forces, being based on the Indian Army model because the Brigade of Gurkhas was based in Nepal until the 1st of July 1997. Despite that, I understand that for most Gurkha veterans, the 1948 Gurkha pension scheme provides a pension at least as good, and in many cases better, than that given to their British counterparts with identical periods of service. It is also the case that under the Gurkha pension scheme, all Gurkhas who retired before the 1st of July 1997 qualified for an immediate pension after only 15 years of service. This meant that typically they would qualify for a pension in their 30s. By contrast, before 1975, British soldiers had to serve at least 22 years before they could receive a pension. This meant that Gurkhas were receiving pension payments for over 25 years before most British soldiers of the same rank and length of service qualified for any payments. Following the change in the home base for the Brigade of Gurkhas in 1997 and a review of their terms and conditions of service in 2007, came a change to their pensions. Following this review, it was decided that the difference between Gurkhas' terms and conditions of service and those of their British counterparts would be eliminated. For Gurkhas currently serving and those with service on or after the 1st of July 1997, there would be an offer to transfer to the Armed Forces pension scheme. The reason for this cut-off was that this was when the UK became the home base for the Brigade of Gurkhas, and changes in immigration rules, backdated to the 1st of July 1997, meant that there was an increased likelihood of retired Gurkhas settling in the UK on discharge. This change, to better reflect the changed circumstances of the Brigade of Gurkhas no longer being based in Nepal, was most welcome. However, clearly, this hasn't solved all the outstanding issues. As such, it is welcome there has been ongoing engagement between the UK government, Nepali embassy officials and Gurkha veteran groups. The former Minister for the Armed Forces met repeatedly with Nepali ministers and veterans groups to discuss the outstanding issues. This led to the production of the technical report in which the Gurkha veterans' grievances, together with the UK government's responses, were set out in one document. This engagement has led to improvements in the Gurkha pension scheme, and in March 2019, a new package of measures was announced, including an increase to pensions under the Gurkha pension scheme of between 10 and 34% above the annual inflation rise, and a new £25 million investment in medical and healthcare facilities in Nepal for Gurkha veterans. The government has since agreed to reconsider the decision on the increase to pensions made in 2019, with a public consultation earlier this year which sought views on how changes should be implemented for the Gurkha pension scheme. That consultation closed earlier this year, and after considering responses, ministers will make a fresh decision on the size of the uplift. The Ministry of Defence has also agreed to start a bilateral committee to discuss all Gurkha veteran welfare issues in December. This move is very welcome, but I understand from what Roy has said that as yet there is no certainty over the timings of this important committee. If it is possible, I'd be very much appreciative if the Minister could share some more details on these plans in his response. Another key issue that Roy raised with me was the ability of Gurkhas and their families to settle in the United Kingdom, being granted citizenship and have the right to vote. Non-UK service personnel, including Gurkhas, can also apply for settlement in the UK upon discharge if they have served a minimum of 4 years and meet the requirements of the immigration rules. Settlement gives you the right to live, work and study here for as long as you like and apply for benefits if you're eligible. You can use it to apply for British citizenship. However, I recognise that while there is a straightforward route to settlement, the current system does place a financial liability on those personnel and their families, costing £2,389 per person. I am therefore delighted that the Ministry of Defence and Home Office are currently analysing the responses received to a draft policy proposal to waive fees for non-UK service personnel if they apply to settle in the UK at the end of their military service, provided certain criteria are met. I'm very happy to give way to the Honourable Lady.
I'm very pleased that the Honourable Member raised the issue of immigration fees, because does he not think that the Home Office are fleecing Gurkhas and other ex-service personnel by charging £2,000 per person for a process that actually only costs £200 to administer?
I'm very grateful for the Honourable Lady's intervention. She probably won't be shocked that I won't use the word fleecing, but what I was going to move on to is actually that I do wholeheartedly support and in favour of the idea of waiving this fee, because the Gurkhas at the end, they have served our country, their country. They've kept me safe, my daughter safe, the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, of Kidsgrove and Torque safe. And I think it's only right and fair that people who are willing to put their lives on the line for our safety as a United Kingdom get the respect that they deserve. And I am imploring, therefore, the Minister and the Home Office, who I'm sure will be watching today, to do the right thing, to waive the fee for those UK Armed Forces personnel, non-UK Armed Forces personnel who have served their country, meet the requirements and do not require them to face the fees. And I know that we have a fantastic Gurkhas veterans community across the United Kingdom. Sorry, I will give way to Honourable Lady.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and I think he's making a very, very powerful speech. And I do wholeheartedly support the call that he's just made to reduce those fees, and also to reference the right to vote that Gurkhas have also raised with me. I just want to ask him just a brief question about the issue of the hunger strike this year, which was raised with me by the Mayor of Hounslow, Mayor Bishnu Gurung, who is himself an ex-British Gurkha staff sergeant. Does the honourable member agree with me that we should never see again that our Gurkhas go on hunger strike to try and get attention because they feel that there isn't an ongoing dialogue that is going to resolve these issues effectively, and that the call he is making for there to be a clear process going forward that has confidence of the Gurkhas is an incredibly important one and a commitment to have from the Minister today?
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and I completely concur. No one wants to see any veteran, whether those are members of the Gurkhas or members of the British Armed Forces who were born and bred in the United Kingdom, having to go to what are very extreme lengths in order to get their voices heard. I will say that I've had some really great meetings with the Minister who's in his place in advance of today's debate to hear from him. I know how seriously he takes his issue. I know how much the Gurkhas mean to him and the people of Aldershot, which I know he represents. And I have absolutely no doubt, therefore, that he will always be a strong and doughty champion for the Gurkha community, and will make sure that they have someone who they know they can go to directly and hear directly from. And obviously are blessed to have the fact that he is the Minister for Veteran Affairs, so they're lobbying the Minister directly, haven't even got to go through him to get to the relevant individual, which is a great situation. I know that the Ministry of Defence, and I note the Parliamentary Private Secretary behind the Minister, who is himself a former member of our armed forces, a colonel who served in there for many years, therefore bringing his years of experience to the department as well to ensure that those individuals do get right, because indeed the Honourable Lady is correct. We should never have to see such scenes. We should never have to. And I'd like to think that the process being outlined by the department, and that's why I think the Minister is really important, outlines that detail for the December committee, so Roy can spread the word back to the Gurkhas that what's going to happen, and they have that full faith and full confidence in the system. And I think that, the fact that we set up the Office of Veteran Affairs is a really positive step forward, because ultimately we're starting to see now Veterans Affairs taking front and centre. And I know that there are members from Northern Ireland who are joining our committee today, and they obviously have a very strong and emotive case, and rightly so, to see that the legacy of claims made against those who served the British forces, but also to be able to draw a line in the sand from the Troubles to move the Northern Irish community onward, which I know the civic community is very, very keen to see going further forward. So I do appreciate that this is an important issue for all of us. And I know also, having spoken with many a Northern Irish MP, that they're absolutely a very open, welcome country. They are very proud to have people from all across our United Kingdom all served, whether that be the Gurkhas or people who live in England today, living and being part of their fantastic country. I'm happy to give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Thank the honourable member for giving way and congratulate him on securing the debate. Just on the issue of the widespread support, which there obviously is across the United Kingdom, would he agree with me that it is time for this nation and this government, as well as previous governments, to defend those who defended us, and to do that right across the board, so that people who stand by the United Kingdom do so in the expectation that in the future the United Kingdom will stand with them?
Very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention. I couldn't agree with him more, that we have to make sure that if you are willing to put your life on the line, that therefore means that you are protected and that you are respected, most importantly as well, because ultimately you are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, potentially fathers and mothers willing to never see their children, their loved ones again. I can't imagine the bravery that takes. I never had the chance to serve, sadly, due to a hearing deficiency, meaning I couldn't pass the medical despite the fact I tried to blag it. But ultimately, I saw my grandfather, having spoken about his story, spoke to my great-great-uncle and what he saw on D-Day as a veteran himself. Ultimately, these people are heroes. And the Gurkhas, when we watched that documentary about their time and their life and their contribution to our United Kingdom's armed forces, when Prince Harry did go and do that expose, or should I say, sorry, the Duke of Sussex, when he did that expose about his time in Afghanistan and was sharing his stories with the newspapers of what it was like to be on the front line, think it was a real time for me as someone who was becoming a teenager to early 20s, really opened my eyes to what the Gurkhas are, which is always on the front line, always the first in, always the last out in many cases. And I think it shows what a tremendous group of individuals who they are and what they're willing to do. But finally, I want to touch on, on one more point Roy made about support that is available to Gurkhas more generally. Over the course of the coronavirus pandemic, the UK has stood shoulder to shoulder with Nepal, making available support to help Gurkhas and their families in Nepal. We were one of the first countries to send life-saving medical equipment to Nepal, including 260 ventilators and thousands of pieces of personal protective equipment to help the country's fight against COVID-19. The UK is also one of the leading donors to COVAX, having committed $548 million to the scheme, and COVAX has allocated 2 million vaccine doses to Nepal. UK aid to the Gurkha Welfare Trust has also ensured access to life-saving support and supplies to Gurkha veterans and their communities throughout the pandemic. Gurkhas who have gained settlement are able to apply for and receive benefits, and as I said earlier, I'm very pleased that the government is looking at how to make settlement rights easier to obtain for non-UK service personnel, including for Gurkhas. In conclusion, Dr. Ruck, I would like to thank Roy again for creating the petition and taking the time to share his time and concerns with me and my staff, and all those who have served Queen and country. It is important that we get it right on the issues that affect our veterans, and the Gurkhas are a special case even amongst that group of heroes. I am pleased that there has been movement on the Gurkha pension scheme with the important changes that came in 2007. I'm happy to give way to the honourable gentleman.
I congratulate my honourable friend for his eloquent introduction to this debate. Would he agree with me? And as a rule, I don't like retrospection in our legislation. But the government of the time and this Parliament decided to give rights to Gurkhas to come and live in our country and have a path to citizenship. Isn't it therefore the case that retrospection could also apply to issues like pensions? The one perhaps follows the other.
Very grateful to the honourable gentleman. I suppose in some ways I would say that retrospection has already happened to a certain extent. As I said earlier, that there has been the uplift already, and that there has been a consultation where they're looking again with the 25 million that's gone in, so I suspect that we'll see more movement. I do understand it is very complicated pre-1997 and that may cause some MOD technical difficulties, but I also understand that the MOD is fully aware of their need, and I will happily give way one more time.
Yes, I take the point that my honourable friend makes. I think the government has made large steps to come to a settlement on almost all of the outstanding issues. But I was in particular referring to those Gurkhas who retired in their service in or before 1997. I'm thinking in particular of Major Chitra Rana, my constituent in Woking, and many others. He's lived in Goldsworth Park in my constituency for many, many years now, as do many other Gurkhas. So I think we do need to look at the pre-1997 retirees as well.
Well, I'm very grateful to my friend, and I totally hear the case, and I'm unfortunate to not have an individual in my constituency who can share their story, and it's a doughty champion, obviously, for his constituents, my honourable friend. And I'm sure that the Minister for Veterans has taken that note and will absolutely sit down and go away with it. And I must say, having spoken with the Minister, I do have confidence there is going to be a very fair settlement coming down the road. It may not be full retrospection like some would want, but I think it will be a suitable and adequate arrival point that means that everyone can start to look forward rather than looking backwards. And clearly, however, this hasn't resolved, as we've just been talking about, and all the concerns of some Gurkha veterans, and so I am pleased that the government has been willing to keep engaging and keep dialogue going. I very much look forward to seeing the response on the public consultation on waiving fees for non-UK service personnel, which I feel could be very significant, as well as the outcome of the bilateral committee on Gurkha veteran welfare. With that, I'll bring my opening remarks to an end. I look forward to hearing what honourable members and the Minister has to say on this important issue. Thank you, Dr. Ruck.
The question is that this House has considered petition 594155. Given the time we've got left in the three front benches, I think if everyone remains within 5 minutes, I think we were doing the math, then everyone gets in. And I start by calling Ruth Cadbury.
Dr. Huck, and it's an honour to speak in your chairship, I think for the first time for me. And I'd also like to very much congratulate the member for Stoke-on-Trent North for his excellent speech. I hopefully won't take as long as 5 minutes, but And I'd also like to thank him for the interventions he took as well, because that was very generous of him. As the MP representing half the borough of Hounslow, and my colleague Seema Malhotra represents the other half, we know that we speak for our local community when we say how proud we are of the large Gurkha community in Hounslow. We're proud not only of their loyal service to our country, including in the fight against fascism in World War II, but we're also proud of their years and years of service locally, whether it's through civic life, through their work with charities, or through the many small businesses which play a huge role in our local economy. And as my honourable friend for Feltham and Heston has already said, our own mayor this year, 2021-22, Councillor Bishnu Bahadur Gurung, served as a staff sergeant with the Gurkhas and retired in 1995 after 19 years of service, having received both a long service and a long service medal and a Good Conduct Award. And after his service and settling in Hounslow, he's worked full-time as a London bus driver. He's also chairman of the Gurkha Nepalese community in Hounslow. And he's such a good reminder that the service the Gurkhas do not end when they retire. So it was heartbreaking to see that a group of Gurkhas went on hunger strike back in August. The fact that they were pushed to go to this length just shows how ignored they felt. And I welcome that they've since met with ministers from the MOD and that there are ongoing talks about a number of issues. We've already touched on the immigration fees issue. Yes, of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I just wanted to ask her in relation to the comments she was making about the Gurkhas and their ongoing service. Does she not agree with me that the way she has described not just the journey of our mayor in Hounslow, but others, that it's indicative as well that he has chosen SAFA to be his mayor's charity as well this year, and drawing in to all he does the story of the veteran community and their engagement in our public life.
Yes, she and I were at the Mayor's fundraising event just 3 weeks ago, where we had a wonderful presentation from SAFA, and we do congratulate the Gurkha community and Councillor Gurung on the work he does to fundraise and to support and spend his time working volunteering time for SAFA. I won't repeat the points already made about the immigration fees, but I'm also concerned about another issue that's not yet been raised, and that's how many Gurkhas living on the low incomes because of the pension problem, so many will have been in fact impacted by the decisions to cut £1,000 a year, £20 a week from universal credit. With over 30,000 families claiming universal credit in Hounslow alone, this will be impacting a number of Gurkha families, and I know that this is an issue that was raised as part of the hunger strike. So, in conclusion, Dr. Huck, surely their service to this country and to communities across the land, they deserve better than being forced to survive on the edge of poverty. So I do hope that when the Minister responds later today, he will make clear just what our government is doing for all those Gurkhas who gave up so much in service to our nation.
Maria Miller.
Thank you, and it's a great pleasure to serve with you in the chair, Dr. Huck. And can I thank the Petitions Committee for making time for this debate, and to my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent North, for very eloquently leading this debate today. And I agree with many of the things that he raised in his speech, and I won't repeat them for the sake of time, but particularly making sure that our relationship with Nepal, as well as the Gurkhas, is as strong as it can be, and the support that he underlined in terms of our support for them around the COVID pandemic. And Dr. Huck, Gurkhas have made an outstanding contribution to the UK over many years of dedicated service and are rightly held in high esteem by both the British Army and the British public. And I've had the honour of meeting many Gurkha veterans in my own constituency in Basingstoke, because we have one of the larger Nepalese communities in the UK, being just down the road from Aldershot, my honourable friend's constituency, the Minister. But I've also had the opportunity of meeting Gurkha soldiers during my time in the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, and though I don't have the years under my belt of some esteemed members here today who served in the Armed Forces, I can say firsthand, having met some of those soldiers in conflict zones, you could understand their tenacity and their resilience, which was writ large. My constituency of Basingstoke is proud of its large Nepalese community, many of whom are Gurkha veterans and have served our country bravely, and their families have decided to make the UK their home. The Gurkha veterans and their wider families play a central role in Basingstoke, including at civic events like Remembrance Sunday very recently, demonstrating the importance of remembering the contribution of people across the globe to protecting our way of life on these shores. And more than 700 people in Basingstoke signed the petition for the debate today. And I'd like to really thank the Petitions Committee for the opportunity to underline the importance of fairness and how we support every member of the British Armed Forces and every former member of the British Armed Forces too. And it's that fairness when it comes to pensions and the way we treat Gurkhas at the end of their military career that's been central to the many conversations and meetings I've had with my constituents who have Nepalese heritage over a number of years. Of course.
Matthew Pennicook.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. She mentioned fairness. Would she agree with me that when we're talking about the need for pension parity, it's not just Gurkha veterans themselves, it's also widows and other family members, who there are many thousands, including in South East London. And then when we're looking at welfare in the round and what the bilateral committee might look into, that widows in receipt of the GPS have got to be at the forefront of hopefully the government's mind.
I think the honourable members actually pointed out the complexities of these discussions that are going to happen in the coming weeks, and I'm sure the Minister would want to hear his remark and pick up on it perhaps later on. Because the welfare of all veterans, including Gurkhas, couldn't be more important. And welfare is, of course, at the heart of the Armed Forces Covenant, brought in by this government to ensure the best support for those who've done so much for our country. Of course.
Faye Jones.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. She mentions the importance of veterans, and I wonder if she would agree with me that Wales being the only country not to have a Veterans Commissioner at the moment is a misstep, and would she join me in urging the Welsh Government to create such a Veterans Commissioner?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and of course I would join her in that way. I've seen firsthand the importance of the Covenant and the way that it's driven this government's commitment to veterans, as well as serving armed forces and their families. And it's, I think, really it's a tried and tested approach. A pledge that the Covenant is a pledge that acknowledges the bravery of those who served our country and also their families too, and that they should be treated with fairness and respect in our communities, our economy and society. And I know that the pension schemes in place for Gurkha veterans have been scrutinised by the courts on a number of occasions too, and that the basis for the way that the Gurkha pensions are set out has been upheld in no less than 3 judicial reviews since 2003, including a European Court of Human Rights case too. But it's right to always keep these things under review, and I'm sure the Minister, my honourable friend, would want to update us on how he is doing that. I'm absolutely delighted that it is the Minister for Veterans who's replying to this debate today, and that he and the Secretary of State have already made it clear that they've met a wide range of Gurkha representatives groups, as well as the Nepalese ambassador, and have committed to further talks, including a bilateral committee, to discuss all these sorts of issues in the coming weeks. And it will be very important to hear more details of that. And obviously that's in addition to other measures that my honourable friend for Stoke-on-Trent North has already gone through, and I won't repeat. Many of the representations I've had from my constituents also refer to the issue of fees for non-UK service personnel applying to settle in the UK at the end of their military service. And I think it would be important to hear perhaps more from the Minister about the work that the Home Office and MOD are doing currently to analyse the responses to the consultation, to a consultation that's on that specific issue. We need a system that's really clearly fair for everybody involved. The Nepalese community in my constituency are an incredible asset to the town in so many ways. Dr. Huck, I won't go through now because time doesn't allow, but I'd like to particularly pay tribute to Mr. Omgurung, who's chair of the Basingstoke Nepalese Society, Mrs. Poonangurung, who is the former head of the UK Nepalese Residents Association, and Gurkhas like Captain Panache Ray, who fought in the Falklands and is now one of 7 people who've opened our Gurkha grocery shop in the centre of town, and many who've campaigned on this issue, including people like Dan Gurung as well. Dr Huck, like so many who've already spoken today in their interventions and their contributions, I'm hoping that my honourable friend, the member for Aldershot, the Minister for Veterans, is going to be able to give us more details of the plans to work with Gurkha representatives to resolve these issues around pensions and immigration fees, because I know that he, like us, want to see a fair way forward for everybody involved.
Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Dr Huck, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I congratulate the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North for starting us off this afternoon. This is, of course, a very important debate. The Gurkha service has been always considered loyal, courage and skillful, and they are synonymous with the very best of the British Armed Forces. During the two world wars, more than 43,000 Gurkhas lost their lives in battle. And since then, they've served in just about every theatre of war, from the Falklands, Kosovo, Iraq and Afghanistan. And ultimately, this is a question of value. How do we consider these individuals? Do we consider them as equal? And are we properly valuing them? Or are they simply a convenient source of personnel? It took until 2009 before the Gurkhas secured the right to settle in the UK. And together with enshrining this in law, it would have been sensible for the UK government to adjust pension allowances at that point for all Gurkhas to account for new living costs, including those who retired before 1997. It was distressing for us to see in August of this year Gurkhas having to go on hunger strike, and that included the widow of one Gurkha soldier. And as one of these individuals said, he was receiving approximately £350 a month in his pension, and that was compared to similar service a veteran receiving approximately £1,200 a month. Now, whilst we can argue about the legalities and the rights and the wrongs and whether it's been through court or whatever, the bottom line is £350 a month is not enough on which to live. So we need to be looking at this. This drastic step of hunger strike. Hunger strikes are always a last resort. They're never the first thing that people try. And that kind of pays testament to the amount of work that's been going on in the Gurkha community for many, many years to try and get this sorted. And a spokesperson for the Ministry of Defence said in relation to these protests that they greatly value the contribution that Gurkhas make and do not wish to see veterans undertaking such protests unnecessarily. I mean, it was good until the word unnecessarily, because they weren't unnecessary protests. And for the Ministry of Defence to imply this was not the sort of rhetoric we should be hearing. And I hope the Minister can take that back to the Ministry and possibly talk to them about the use of language, because language is important. And when I come back to that word value that I mentioned, it does matter. Now, the hunger strike ended after 13 days, and the government committed to extensive consultation with the establishment of a bilateral committee on Gurkha welfare issues. But we've not seen any change as yet. Talks are not enough. This has to be sorted. And Gurkha veterans, including those that served pre-1997, must be paid an equal pension. But of course, as others have mentioned, this is part of a wider issue. We don't have fair status for personnel from overseas. I mean, an individual with a wife and 2 children, for example, will be paying £10,000 to try and bring the partner and children here. There's instances of individuals being refused NHS treatment. So it's high time that the UK government treats both non-UK born veterans and veterans born in the UK in the same way. Let's respect and honour their service. if this government is serious about its commitment to veterans, all veterans, regardless of their place of birth, we've got to see pension equality. We've got to see a waiver of immigration fees. And we've got to see a serious approach to veterans' affairs, regardless of where they're born. This is literally a no-brainer. And I'm sure the Minister's already on this case, because I know he is a champion of veterans. I know he'll be working away, but let's not have this same debate in a year's time.
Faye Jones.
Dr Huck, it's a pleasure to see you in the chair, and I should start by declaring an interest in that my partner is a serving member of the Armed Forces, although not a Gurkha. I do want to thank the Petitions Committee for bringing forward this debate and for the typically energetic opening contribution from my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent North. I rise to speak because the Gurkha community are a treasured and valued part of my constituency in Brecon and Radnorshire, so I am not surprised that 253 people signed this petition. We share a long history with the Gurkhas, who, as we know, have played a critical role in aiding our British Army for the last 200 years. I was struck by the comments from the member for Brentford and Isleworth when she mentioned the Commonwealth history of our soldiers, and I do think that is an element of our history that is not well understood, and perhaps we need to do more on that. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak on my support for the Gurkhas once again. I described my strong affection for them in my maiden speech, but delighted to do so once again. This debate is in very good hands. I know that this Armed Forces Minister very much values the Gurkha community that he represents, and I thank him for his consistent engagement with the Gurkha community nationally. The hunger strike we saw earlier this year was extremely difficult to watch, but drew national attention to this important issue. There is no doubt that all in this place are extremely sympathetic to their campaign, and I know that the Minister will give reassurance later that he is doing all he can. My home in Brecon is not only home to hundreds of Gurkha families, but is also twinned with the beautiful village of Dampus in the northern part of Nepal. Gurkha soldiers that I have met say... Yes, I certainly will. Yes, happy to.
Dr Jamie Wallace.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does she agree with me that places with high proportions of Gurkha veterans, such as my Bridgend constituency in Wales, should be incredibly proud of that, actually, and also that it is the right thing to do to remove the financial liabilities on Gurkha veterans wanting to resettle in the UK, and especially in Wales, provided, of course, that they meet the criteria?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I agree with him. I think that I will go on to talk about that later in my speech. But Gurkha soldiers that I have met in my constituency tell me that they love living in Wales. They have a strong connection, and it reminds them very much of life back at home in Nepal. In my constituency, they are valued members. Many volunteer with the Brecon Beacons National Park. Many are heavily involved in the hospitality community, and I think of Kuzuman Gurung, who runs the New Gurkha Inn in Talgarth, and I highly recommend their curry. But there are many active soldiers who work at the Infantry Battle School in Brecon. As we have already heard, the issue of pension rights is extremely emotive, but Britain does have a strong history of protecting its soldiers and veterans. I will always campaign for us to do more, and I refer again to my campaign for the Welsh Government to create a Veterans Commissioner in Wales so that veterans right across the UK can count on consistent support from all of their governments. I very much support and echo the comments from my honourable friend for Bridgend. I very much support the recent proposal to waive settlement fees for non-UK service personnel. I hope that the Minister will be able to say more about that. I cannot support the accusation that the Gurkha pension scheme is less than satisfactory than the Armed Forces pension scheme, as has been raised during the debate. The majority of Gurkhas residing in the UK qualified for the GPS received an immediate pension after 15 years' service. This is different to British soldiers on the Armed Forces pension scheme, who mostly do not serve the 22 years necessary to qualify for an immediate pension, instead having a preserved pension payable at the age of 60. So quite rightly, Gurkha veterans are well looked after in line with their years of dedicated service to the British Armed Forces. I was delighted that in 2019, the previous Minister for the Armed Forces, now in the other place, provided a £15 million increase to the Gurkha pension scheme, increasing pensions upwards of 34%. This was a welcome and deserved increase. The government has ensured that cultural norms are met and, I believe, protected by ensuring that in the event of the death of a Gurkha pensioner, the surviving spouse, children, parents and dependent siblings are eligible for it. It is very difficult to introduce improvements to public service pensions retrospectively, and so I hesitate to amend the Gurkha or to call for amendments to the Gurkha pension as it stands. The large majority of Gurkhas in the UK qualify for the 1997 threshold, are therefore most critically eligible for the AFPS, in addition to qualifying for the full range of welfare benefits, including pensions credit. To conclude, with just a few seconds remaining, I believe that this to be a fair and just scheme that protects our most valued Gurkha veterans, ensuring they deserve a well-deserved retirement. But I do urge the Minister to continue his engagement with Gurkha veterans and, above all, veterans right across the UK.
And to be honest, with the dropout, we can elasticise the time of 5 minutes. I should have said, sorry. But to take advantage is Matt Rodder.
Thank you, Dr. Huck, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I'm grateful to speak in this very important debate today. I'd like to make 3 points in the time that's available to me. First of all, to add my support to the points made by the Honourable Member for Stoke North to pay tribute to the Gurkhas and their service to this country over nearly two centuries, to point out the high level of local support within Reading and Woodley for this community and their valued service, and also to call on the Minister, who I'm looking forward to hearing his speech later, to respond in detail to the issues that have been raised. First of all, Dr. Huck, I would like to spend a few moments paying tribute to the Gurkhas. They have a long and loyal service to this country, and it's worth mentioning some of the military history in a brief form. They were vital in World War I. It's less well known than their service in World War II. They played a crucial role in the defence of India in World War II, and they've taken part in many recent conflicts defending this country and our interests overseas. These include, obviously, the Falklands and Afghanistan, and many others in between. We owe a debt of honour to these brave soldiers, and I do hope that the Minister, who I obviously understand is a gallant gentleman, will respond in an appropriate way. I would like to point out, as other colleagues have today, the very high level of support in our community, and indeed to perhaps dwell on some of the measures from the community's own support for the Gurkhas. I also wanted to add that I was privileged some years ago to visit Nepal, and I would like to say that I was overwhelmed with the generosity of local people and the wonderful support they have for foreign visitors to their beautiful country. Reading has a population of nearly 3,000 Gurkha and Nepalese people, as the Honourable Lady from Basingstoke mentioned, common in our part of southern England, close indeed to Aldershot. Many are retired Gurkhas, although not entirely. We have some highly skilled migrants from Nepal as well. And many of them live on relatively modest incomes. We have a number of pre-1997 pensioners living on very modest incomes in what is, I'm afraid to say, a high-cost area within the southeast of England. Many work in crucial local public services, as indeed other colleagues have referred to earlier, such as in the NHS at the Royal Berkshire Hospital, on Reading buses, where many serve as bus drivers, many other forms of public service as well, and indeed in local businesses, and we're proud to have many small local businesses linked to the Gurkha community. I would like to pay a very special tribute to one particular former soldier, Warrant Officer Gayan Raj Rai, who's played a crucial part in this campaign. And as other colleagues will have mentioned, indeed, many of our colleagues here today will have met Gayan Raj Rai because he's been on hunger strike not only once, but twice in the last 10 years. I first met him in 2013, when I was then the Labour parliamentary candidate in the Reading East constituency. And I have to say he is the most gallant gentleman, and I would like to pay tribute to him and all the other local people who've taken part in this campaign. Our hearts are with them, and we do wish them well in their endeavours. And he has conducted himself with the utmost number 10 Downing Street for a number of days, suffering greatly, as did the other hunger strikers. I would hope that the government will now hear this plea and do what other local communities in their own way have done to support our British Gurkhas. In Reading, we have excellent support from Reading Borough Council, where they have given veterans priority in the Council House waiting list. We've had other support from charities and from the community, often forms of a wide range of forms of help, such as helping elderly veterans, particularly their families, learn English, and a number of other forms of support. And there's huge support and appetite for continuing this and helping people to integrate into society in this country. And I hope, in his own way, the Minister will reflect this when he comes to speak later. So to conclude, I would like to now ask the Minister to address these difficult issues. I appreciate this is hugely difficult and technical, as the Honourable Gentleman from Stoke North mentioned, but I do believe it is now high time for the Government to investigate this further, to begin a dialogue with the Nepalese Government and to continue and deepen its dialogue with the veterans. And I look forward to the Minister's speech. Thank you, Dr. Huck.
Okay, we've actually made really good time because this is the last of the backbenchers now, but we are going to have to suspend at 7 o'clock. So let's see how far we get. Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to speak on this, and I was very keen to come down and participate. And I also want to, if I can, thank the Backbench Committee for bringing forward this petition, and to the Honourable Member for Stoke on Trenton North for introducing it in such a well-rehearsed and well-proposed fashion, and thank him for that. No member of this House, as others have said, is under any illusion as to the debt that is owed to the Gurkhas. And the issue of this pension is an issue which I have raised in the House in 2011 and following on from this by others on many, many occasions as well. To put it quite simply, the historic treatment that the Gurkhas have received during the 200 years that they have proudly served this nation has been disgraceful, and I believe must come to an end. Gurkhas have served in the British Army around the world since 1947, and even before this, 43,000 Gurkhas gave their lives fighting in the First and Second World Wars. Their bravery is the stuff of legends, and I think every one of us would have some contact with the Gurkhas over the years. I know that when I did the all-party parliamentary scheme for to the armed forces, I had the opportunity to meet some of the guys. We weren't just him, I'll never forget it. I was greatly humbled, Madam Chair, to be in their presence. I say it quite honestly, because I was, because the Gurkhas for me have always been those men of small stature, perhaps, but I tell you what, with a tremendous courage and with a bravery that surpassed and equalled many others across this great nation. Many years ago, I'd also had the opportunity down at Mount Stewart in my constituency of Strangford, where the Gurkhas were the special attraction for the beating of the retreat. It was idyllic, Madam Chair. It will remain in my memory for all my life. My wife and I were both invited this a few years ago, but it was a lovely summer, sunny evening. And out at the Mount Stewart House, which is run by the National Trust, the beating of the retreat was done by the Gurkhas. Unforgettable, and to the day I die, I'll always remember it. So it's been more than 3 years since the joint technical report on the British Gurkha case was exchanged between two governments on the 22nd of March 2018 at Whitehall in London, which was the basis for a dialogue to address the main concerns of the British Gurkhas, the very things that every person here has said today. To date, the silence has been deafening, and it's time we stepped up and stepped in, just as the Gurkhas have done for us. The Honourable Gentleman in his intervention referred to the bravery of the Gurkhas, and they deserve the equal treatment quite simply because they fought in the same theatres of war alongside those who have got the full pensions, which the Honourable Lady referred to, and which the Gurkhas haven't. The people have made clear their opinion in signing this petition, as clear as a bell, as clear as it can be, and there can be no doubt whatsoever. They do not believe that we are doing the right thing. So the issue for us today, I believe, and for the Minister, who I have the utmost respect for, and as the Honourable Member for Stoke-upon-Trent said, and just a bit before me, does not believe that we are doing the right thing. So I'm sure that those who have already spoken before myself and the shadow spokespersons who will speak afterwards do not believe that we are doing the right thing either. At what stage will we, and I pose this as a question, at what stage will we decide to do the right thing by these brave men and their families? Because it's not just about the soldiers, it's about their families as well. It's about, they've deserved this, they've honoured this, they've delivered it, and they deserve to have it carried out. How many petitions will it take? How many protests? How many demonstrations? How many hunger strikes? It has been already too many. Madam Chair, the Minister must, I believe, help us today with a response that outlines the steps that will be taken to ensure that parity is restored with the other arms of our armed forces. one of the Gurkhas that took part in the hunger strike said in an article, and I read it in the Daily Express, and I quoted, that he received just £47 a month after he retired, while his British counterparts got £800, a 16-fold difference. The Honourable Lady, I'm quite happy to you.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Normally it's him who intervenes on me, so it's a great honour to intervene on him. He makes the very important point about the huge difference in payments received. And does he not agree with me that one of the reasons behind this inequality, with the assumption having been that many would be going back to Nepal who didn't, needs to be understood and addressed by virtue of the reality that is now their reality and their lived lives, not the assumption that was made many decades ago now.
Thank you really for that there, and she's absolutely right. It's not about assumption, it's the reality. So this debate's about the reality for what it is for the Gurkha soldiers and for where they are. The Honourable Liddy, in her contribution, she also referred to the fact that the soldier today receives £350 a month compared to £1,200 for former British soldiers. £850 difference. Is that parity? Is that equality? Is that right? No, it's not. And therefore, it's very clear to me that we've got to try and do something. When the Gurkhas fight, no one can accuse them of being second-class warriors. Their courage is equal, if better, on some occasions. They're in a class of their own, and yet they demand only parity, equity and fairness. They fought alongside other regiments and more often than not the forefront in battle, and deserve the same benefits, the same pensions, the same welfare that their colleagues have been in receipt of. So how many right-thinking persons can argue that this is not a debt that is owed, and that we do have a role to play in ensuring the payment of this debt? I believe it's as strong as that. I certainly can't, and therefore again today I'm proud, along with others, to stand with the Gurkhas as they have stood for freedom and democracy under the banner of our monarchy and of our Queen and our King, whenever that was the case. I do understand, of course, that there are talks set to begin between the UK and Nepal in the form of a bilateral committee to discuss all Gurkha veteran welfare issues. However, that concern, and I put it on the record, and that concern is something that appears valid to me, is that this talking shop will deliver the same results as previous attempts, nothing of consequence. So can I ask the Veterans Minister this question? Can he perhaps tell this debate today in Westminster Hall, and for the record of answer, what his expectations are in the bilateral talks to deliver for the Gurkhas? Because that's what we want. We want delivery for the Gurkhas. I conclude with this comment, ever conscious that we're going to be going to... Yeah, quite hard.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way. He talks eloquently about Gurkha welfare. One issue that Gurkhas living in my constituency of Woking have brought to me is that when they're settled here, particularly when they become British citizens, travel abroad to family that are still in Nepal can be very difficult, very bureaucratic, sometimes expensive as well. And would he welcome the Minister just spending a couple of moments in his speech to us to explain what we're doing in dialogue with Nepal to try and resolve some of those issues?
Yeah, well, can I thank the Honourable Gentleman for that? That's a very, very valid point. And yes, I would certainly look to the Minister, as we often do, to have a response on that. I'm sure the Minister is already is getting that from his PPS in relation to the answer that we wish to hear. But if other soldiers can get the rights of travel, then I would suggest that we should be doing the same for them. That we will still have Gurkhas and their families living in poverty, despite believing that fighting for the British, for our government, for our country, for our Queen, may mean that their life would also mean security for their families. So when we deliver for the Gurkha soldiers, we also deliver for the families. They deserve nothing less. And the message from this place today, as all have said, we must be that we will settle for nothing less on their behalf. In other words, we want what they and other soldiers have got for the Gurkhas. No, nothing less, nothing more. Thank you.
David Linden.
It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'm conscious that the Minister appears now to have been talking for over half an hour, so I fully expect that the division bells will probably ring somewhere through my speech, but perhaps members will be glad of a break from me in that. I want to start by thanking my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk, for opening this very important debate and setting the scene so eloquently, and in doing so, I'd like to also pay tribute to the 87 signatories in Glasgow East who signed the petition. Now, in winding up the debate for the SNP, I want to acknowledge the 12 speeches from backbenchers or contributions, all of whom made a passionate case, and I'm sure that the Minister will be reflecting on that. But in particular, I want to pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow North West, who made an excellent speech and has been a frequent campaigner on this topic. I think she said in the course of her remarks it was important that we pay tribute to the 33,000 Gurkhas who lost their lives over the course of the World Wars. Now, Dr Huck, for far too long, the contributions of service personnel from across the Commonwealth have been undervalued and overlooked. Many of us have been engaged in the frozen pensions APPG for some time now, and it remains a massive stain on Global Britain's brand that so many pensioners, particularly those who serve their country, languish in pensioner poverty overseas. Now, for 50 years, Gurkhas have served in the British Army, fighting in 2 world wars and in conflicts all across the globe, and we should be commemorating the contribution of all Commonwealth service personnel, including the Gurkhas who have served in the armed forces. And I firmly believe that we all owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the people who have chosen to serve and sacrifice so much. However, instead of recognising the importance of service personnel from across the Commonwealth, the British Government is set on undermining and dismissing the sacrifice that many have made. This Government has continually been unable, or perhaps even unwilling, to recognise the complications that have stemmed from the deeply unfair terms of employment for Gurkhas that last changed in 1997. And as such, there has been a long history of the UK military refusing to pay Gurkhas the same wages and pensions as UK personnel, despite the fact that Gurkhas and UK personnel served alongside each other, made the same sacrifices and certainly took the same risks. And despite their service, the Gurkhas were shamefully treated as other by the British Government and the Ministry of Defence, and instead of being given UK service personnel pensions, the Gurkhas were given conditions that roughly matched those of the Indian Army. Now, this pension is significantly lower than the UK pension, already, I would argue, not particularly generous, and as such it gave many Gurkhas a lower standard of living and led to them falling into extreme poverty. It also meant that the Gurkhas were intentionally not integrated into the main British Army, thus putting them at a disadvantage in comparison to UK-born peers. Now, no matter where the Gurkhas were deployed, their pay and pension were...
We're going to have to suspend now. Officially, it's 25 minutes for 2 votes. I mean, I think if we're back before that, so the second one, be back quick after the second one, basically, then we can all finish earlier. But sitting suspended for now. Thank you. Resumed until maximum of 7:44. David Linden, before he was so rudely interrupted.
I will not hold that against it. I'm very happy to give out my honourable friend.
I'm sorry to rudely interrupt him again. I apologise to you, Chair, as well. This is a fleeting visit because I'm trying to be in both chambers at the same time and haven't quite really mastered the act yet. Before I left, the Honourable Gentleman raised the key issue for me and many of my constituents, which is the issue of poverty that they've been thrust into as a result of, to be frank, an act of gross discrimination over years. Does he believe the same as me, that because of the length of service, the commitment that they've shown, both in terms of the human sacrifices that have been made, we should never allow this group of people to live in that level of poverty that he described earlier, and that we need redress as rapidly as possible?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that intervention, and I'm very glad that he's been able to make it to the debate and to put that on record for his constituents in Hayes and Harlington. They're very lucky to have him there. I know he's got a big Gurkha community, and I absolutely do agree with him on that. Now, I mentioned my honourable friend from Glasgow North West earlier. She has highlighted the fact that many Gurkhas who come to this country are separated from their families, only to be hit with exorbitant visa fees. I also want to highlight and pay tribute to the immense bravery of the 3 hunger-striking Gurkha veterans who refused food for 13 days until the British government agreed to further talks. One of the strikers, Mr Dan Goering, explained that his pension in 1994 was £20 a month and said that he and his family lived in poverty because of the British government. And this is his description, Dr Huck, penny pinching. And I think this, I'm afraid, is the crux of the issue. Far too many Gurkhas now find themselves and their families in poverty due to not being eligible for the UK Armed Forces pension. And I'm glad to hear that the UK Government has since met with the Gurkha advocacy groups, representatives from the Nepali Embassy and indeed the Ambassador. And further to these discussions, the announcement of the bilateral committee to discuss all Gurkha veteran welfare issues is certainly a positive step forward. However, the measure of progress on this won't be words, it will be action, and I would absolutely concur with the point made by my honourable friend from Strangford that this cannot be a talking shop, and I'm sure that the Minister will be reflecting on that. Now, the Ministry of Defence outlined in their statement that they are, and I quote, committed to ensuring that the Gurkha pension scheme is sustainable and fair alongside other UK public sector pensions. And I, Dr Huck, would pose a question to this House that, yes, it's one thing to compare pensions alongside each other, but one of the things that we're not doing in this debate is comparing the fact that Gurkhas have served in the exact same way alongside British forces. So if we can compare and recognise the equality in theatre, then surely the same should be true of pensions. So I very much urge the Government to uphold that commitment to the Gurkhas and ensure that they are treated equally. Now, the Gurkhas have the support of many of their comrades who they served alongside in several veterans groups in the UK. Service personnel born in the UK recognise the sacrifice and the contribution of those in the Commonwealth, and it is time that the British Government does the same. So the Government should resolve this issue and ensure parity by simply matching Gurkha veterans, personnel and recruits to the same terms as those serving in the armed forces from the UK. But this Government's lack of full recognition of Gurkhas in UK service, as well as those from the wider Commonwealth, is a fundamental failure to right a transparent and, I would argue, historic wrong. Moreover, as I said earlier, I think it is an enormous stain on the so-called and much-vaunted Global Britain strategy, which this Government trumpets. And even if the terms might be being changed retrospectively, the Government has a moral duty to those that have risked their lives in the UK Armed Forces to treat them with the same respect as those serving who come from the UK or these islands itself. So myself and my SNP colleagues will certainly continue to work cross-party to ensure that proper recognition is in place for people from the Commonwealth and beyond who have served in the armed forces. But to be quite blunt, it is time that the British Government gives the Gurkhas this recognition and respect, because anything less would, in my view, be shameful.
Shadow Minister Stephen Morgan.
It's a pleasure to serve under the chair of my honourable friend, the member for Ealing Central Acton, Dr Huck. I want to start by thanking the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent North for his comprehensive and compassionate introduction to this subject. At its heart, this issue is about how we treat those who have served our country. And it is a long-running, complex and fraught with understandably strong feelings from the armed forces communities and the British public at large. I hope we can make some progress today in this debate and look forward to the Minister's summing up for the sake of those that are facing day-to-day reality of the challenges of this community. Dr Huck, we have heard from a great range of speakers from across the House in powerful speeches and useful contributions tonight, all of which I believe have recognised the distinction of which Gurkhas serve our country and our armed forces, and the fact that many continue to contribute significantly after leaving Her Majesty's Armed Forces. We heard from the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North details of the bilateral talks and how important those will be next month. The important issue of the Commonwealth visa issues. It's worth pointing out that government proposals currently under consultation will only benefit 1 in 10 veterans. And he did stress the importance of waiving fees and looks forward to those proposals coming forward. We heard from the Honourable Friend for Brentford and Arworth on the impact of universal credit on those already on low incomes. The Right Honourable Member for Basingstoke, who is not in her place, she spoke very passionately about the contribution of the Nepalese community in Basingstoke, an area I know very well, being a former Chief Exec of Basingstoke Voluntary Action. The Honourable Member for Glasgow North West flagged a number of points about the injustice that's faced by the community and the day-to-day impact that this is having on their lives. The Honourable Friend for Reading East, an active campaign on this issue, and I was very privileged to meet with him and a number of Gurkhas in his own constituency this weekend. And the Honourable Member for Strangleford, who always contributes in these important debates, very powerfully put that it's time to step up and step in to help Gurkhas. And he also said, the debt we owe them. Thank you for raising those points. So to set this debate in its proper context, I would like to start by reminding us of the contribution Gurkhas have made to the British Armed Forces. Gurkhas have served in Her Majesty's Armed Forces for more than 200 years, from the earliest recruits in the East India Company through to 2 world wars in which more than 238,000 Gurkhas enlisted into the brigade, to the Falklands, Gulf Wars and multiple tours of Afghanistan. They have made an outstanding contribution to the UK through centuries of service and sacrifice. They are rightly held in high esteem by both the British Army itself and the wider British public. Recently, I had the great privilege to spend some time with the Gurkha Regiment as part of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme in a visit to Folkestone. And I saw there their unique skills and professionalism firsthand. We owe each and every one of them a debt of gratitude and admiration, as we do all members of our armed forces. Their contribution to our national security was no greater or lesser than anyone else who has served our country. And it's that basic point of issue of fairness that much of this debate hinges on. Chair, the campaign for Gurkha pension equality has been a long-standing one. It was a Labour government in 2007 that last sought to grasp the nettle on this difficult issue. The Gurkha offer to transfer was a landmark settlement at the time and a bid for lasting equality for those who bravely served our country. Yet since then, it is easy to see that this situation has changed. The legacy of Gurkha Pension Scheme, GPS, was designed to provide a good standard of living to those retired to Nepal. But many retired Gurkhas still live in the UK following their service, particularly since the 2009 changes to immigration rules. This has inevitably posed cost of living challenges and presented an issue of fundamental inequality. The fact is, a pre-1997 veteran will receive up to £5,000 per year less through the Gurkha Pension Scheme than those through the Armed Forces Pension Service, which those serving after 1997 transferred to. However, it is important to point out that a direct comparison between annual payments does not take account of differences in structure and pay, and the fact that the GPS begins to pay pensions much earlier. Nevertheless, I remain deeply concerned by ongoing reports that Gurkha veterans living in the UK on low incomes and in receipt of universal credit, as we've heard powerfully this evening. This will surely have only exacerbated by the government's recent tax rises and the soaring cost of fuel this winter and the resulting inflation. It can only be right that measures should be considered to ensure that all Gurkha veterans have the opportunity to live securely in retirement, with the support and gratitude of the British government if necessary. As I heard in Reading at the weekend when meeting with veteran community, it is worth saying briefly that pension inequality is sadly not the only issue compounding a cost of living crisis for Gurkhas, and indeed all non-UK personnel alike. Labour has made efforts to end the shameful scandal of eye-watering visa fees faced by non-UK personnel, including many Gurkhas. Sadly, the government voted against our amendments to the Armed Forces Bill, which would have waived extortionate costs for those serving more than 4 years. Ministers cynically cite their own plans as proof of progress on this disgraceful injustice, but their plans would help just 1 in 10 of those non-UK veterans who left the armed forces last year. The truth is, ministers are content with making these personnel pay twice to stay in the country that they have fought for. This is yet another instance where the government's promises to our veterans have been broken. When veterans come up against these issues, their local councillors and the voluntary sector often end up as the first line of defence. Chair, it would be remiss of me on this issue not to mention the work of councillors across the country that have provided pastoral support and a political voice to those that are impacted. And I particularly want to pay tribute to Rushmore Labour councillors Alex Crawford and Nadia Martin for their work on this issue and their engagement with service communities more broadly. I would also like to take this opportunity to mention the UK Nepal Fellowship Society and the Gurkha Equal Rights Group. They continue to highlight these issues and kindly helped my engagement on this issue over the summer. Chair, the strength of feeling on this important issue is summarised neatly by over 100,000 plus people who have signed this petition. Fittingly, the constituency with the highest number of signatories to that of the Honourable Member for Aldershot, the Minister of Defence, People and Veterans. And I know that he's engaged with this issue, and I hope this serves once again to highlight its significance to his constituents and the wider British public. As I mentioned earlier, this issue was given renewed urgency by events this summer. On the 7th of August, a group of 3 pre-1997 Gurkha veterans were forced to hunger strike outside Downing Street following the government's failure to engage with their concerns. No one, and particularly not veterans of the British Army, should have to resort to a hunger strike to be heard. I went to visit them outside Downing Street to hear campaigners' views directly. And what struck me most was their desire to be listened to. They just wanted to be heard by the country that they had fought for. I visited on day 4 of their 13-day hunger strike, and I've lobbied the Defence Secretary the previous day about the issue. At this time, ministers refusing to engage and hoping the issue would go away. But the dignified determination of the Gurkhas would not be denied, and 13 days later the government committed to further talks. I remain astonished by the stubbornness of ministers on this issue. First and foremost, this is an issue of health and safety. While I do not condone the form of protest, and I'm very pleased about the health of those protesting was not seriously affected, I cannot believe a government that claims to be so passionately supportive of the armed forces let this happen. Years of talks and 13 days of hunger striking before a comprehensive response. It's the same arrogance we have seen too often from this government in recent weeks. Chair, those who serve our country deserve so much better. So that brings us to the present day and my asks of the Minister. The government has 2 important opportunities to make progress on this issue. First, I'm very pleased that the governments of the UK and Nepal will soon convene a bilateral committee to discuss Gurkha welfare issues. I'd be grateful if the Minister would set out the government's approach to these talks, including what he hopes to achieve on pensions. Second, as I speak, the government is yet to respond to its own consultation on the Gurkha pension scheme and whether it should see a further uplift. Chair, that closed 8 months ago. I would like to think the Minister is in a position today to finally give us a sense of direction of travel on this issue. And will he commit to publishing its response before the start of the bilateral talks? These benches understand it's a complex issue without an easy answer. We understand and appreciate the significant costs involved in any remedy, but we cannot continue to ignore the fundamental lack of equity in this situation, or sweep it under a rug because it is not convenient. Labour has offered to help reach a cross-party agreement on a way forward, and I reiterate that offer today to the Minister. Chair, I hope the Minister will provide long overdue leadership and accountability on this issue. That is exactly what the service of Gurkhas to our country demands.
Minister
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very grateful for the Shadow Minister's remarks. And I want to start by putting on record my thanks to the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North for leading this debate. And I would like to reiterate the thanks that he expressed to Roy Brinkley. I'd like to thank Mr Brinkley, whom I've met more than once, for his service in the Grenadier Guards and for his continued interest in this issue. I would also like to thank the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North for the reference he made to his own family's record of service and the work in Smallthorne of the Veterans Breakfast Club at the Green Star pub, run by Martin Hunt and Paul Horton. I'm very grateful that he's interested in that sort of activity in his constituency. I commend his efforts to look after our veterans. So, Madam Chair, if I can just briefly lay out, kick off with the theme of parity. It's clear that the government highly values the service of all members of the armed forces, particularly Gurkhas, with their magnificently long and distinguished record of service. I think for the purpose of this debate tonight, we need to be very clear that since 2007, Gurkhas have indeed served on the same basis as the remainder of the British Army. And under consideration really are those who enlisted and served prior to 1997. Figures show that there are currently around 20,681 Gurkha veterans receiving the 1948 Gurkha pension scheme, and that number is comprised of 13,289 former service personnel and 7,382 widows. That's important because widows receive normally 60% plus of the pension of their former partner. Now, that figure of some 20,000 pensions, that describes the scale of this issue, but also it describes the magnificent scale of the record of service of the Gurkhas. The Honourable Gentleman referred to their magnificent 200 years of service, 13 Victoria Crosses, won by native Gurkhas, and I'm very, very proud of the deep local connection that I have with the Brigade of Gurkhas in my borough of Aldershot. We're very pleased to be the home of Teng Queen Zone Gurkha Logistic Regiment, and many, many thousands of Gurkhas have settled and now make their homes in Aldershot, Farnborough and the borough of Rushmore following 2009 change in status of settlement. This represents a hugely successful integration and settlement, and I want to put on record my thanks to 3 Nepalese Gurkha councillors we have in the borough of Rushmore, Jib Belbas, Nem Tapa and Prabesh KC, whom, under the sponsorship and encouragement of the leader of Rushmore Borough Council, the brilliant Councillor David Clifford, show amazing levels of tenacity, civic pride and energy. And this was all brought to, beautifully illustrated by the recent unveiling of the Gurkha Victoria Cross winner, Kulbir Tapa Magar, and I was honoured to attend that in Rushmore very recently. So we are fiercely proud of our Gurkha community in the borough of Rushmore. Now, going to the heart of the matter, which is about parity, I think it's very, very useful, given all the complexity and the fact that Gurkhas receive, members of the 1948 Gurkha pension scheme receive their pension earlier on, they qualify at an earlier point. I think it is instructive just to reflect on, in the round, of the lifetime benefit of the 1948 Gurkha pension scheme compared to the Armed Forces pension scheme 1975, which the majority of British service personnel and veterans would be receiving. So if we compare a private soldier retiring in 1998 with 15 years service, if we compare him on the 1948 Gurkha pension scheme to a British private retiring after 15 years service, the member of the Gurkha pension scheme, the lifetime value of his pension will be £179,000, compared to the British service person, that will be 114. And that reflects on the fact that the Gurkha recipient will be receiving that at an earlier stage, and that work has been done by the government's actuary department. If we consider the value to a corporal, let's take a corporal retiring in 1995 after 15 years of service, the lifetime value for the Gurkha corporal will be 158,000, compared to a British corporal retiring after 15 years service on the Armed Forces Pension Scheme 75, the value will be 150. So that's 158 for the Gurkha and 150,000 for the non-Gurkha. This describes the complexity therein and also reflects the fact that Gurkhas traditionally have been in receipt of these pensions earlier on. We should also point out that, of course, the vast majority of these pensions, out of the 20,000, it's only 150 that are not drawn in the pool. Those pensions drawn in the pool do not incur tax, and this reflects the fact that the construct of the 1948 Gurkha pension scheme was designed to support Gurkhas, the vast majority of whom at that point were retiring in the pool. I've already mentioned the fact that widows receive 60% generally of the value of the pension of their former service partner, and this costs HMG £90 million per annum. This is something we're very proud of because it's right that we should be investing in our Nepalese veterans. Now, of course, we don't apply retrospection to pensions, but we have had uplift. And the Central Pay Commission that meets every 10 years has provided, since 1999, more than a 1,000% uplift in the value of Gurkha pensions to those receiving them. And that counters the effect of cost of living in Nepal. And that's something that we should note. Now, I've mentioned the fact that we would not apply retrospection to pensions, and also the recent Central Pay Commission recommended an uplift of between 10 and 34% and an investment of £25 million in healthcare. Clearly, we have had the conclusion of the consultation, and I look forward to the government's final decision being announced in due course. And I regret I do not have time to give way because I've got 2 minutes. But of course, we listen, and my door is always open to Gurkha veterans. And I was very pleased in August to meet with the Nepalese ambassador in September to meet with the Nepalese ambassador and the Defence Secretary to agree to a welfare dialogue to ensure that all issues attendant to Gurkhas with regard to their welfare are discussed in a bilateral manner. And I look forward to that commencing in due course. The Defence Secretary was very pleased to see the Nepalese Prime Minister in Glasgow during COP26, and I look forward to being at the heart of that future dialogue. Several members raised issues around paying to have indefinite leave to remain. Again, that is subject to the consultation. I look forward to the government announcing the outcome of that review in due course, but I am confident that we will make provision which honours the magnificent record of loyal service and sacrifice exemplified by our magnificent Gurkhas. Thank you.
Concluding remarks from Jonathan Dulles.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruck, and thank you to all those who took part. And I don't know if it's customary, Dr. Ruck. Am I allowed to take an intervention at this summing up stage? Or because I did notice that my right honourable friend, Member South Swindon, was keen to get in. Thank you very much, Dr. Ruck.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. Can I just say on behalf of the Gurkha community in Swindon that I have the honour of representing, I've wrestled with these issues for many years. Does he, like me, take some encouragement from the hard work of the Minister, particularly working on the uplift and the negotiations that he's been conducting with the intercession of the Nepalese Embassy since September?
Thank you very much, my right honourable friend, for giving way. Giving the intervention, and absolutely agree with him that I think the Minister has been exemplary. I know how tirelessly he's worked, and thank him for all the kindness he showed me in preparation for today's debate, as well as my right honourable friend, the Member of South Swindon, who was very kind to offer his words of encouragement and knowledge in this issue. I think it's been a fantastic debate. I think it's very clear that we all absolutely respect and want to see the Gurkhas well looked after, and I look forward to hearing the outcome of the consultation and the government announcements coming in hopefully a few weeks' time.
The question is that this House has considered e-petition 594155 relating to Gurkha pensions. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. Sitting adjourned.
The proceeding has ended.